welcome. And for you here with us, welcome to you also. This is the July 27th meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board of Directors. We will start by calling the meeting to order. If the secretary will please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Shank. Director Chair Richards.
Here.
Director Camacho.
Present.
Vice Chair Miller.
Here.
Assembly Member Arembula. Director Perea. Director Gilmetti.
Present.
Director Escutia. Director Williams. Senator Gonzalez. Director Cohen. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And we expect Directors Cohen and Perea shortly. And did you say Assembly Member Arambula, did you say he will be joining later or not? Or did you know?
I don't know.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. With that, if I could ask Director Escutia to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm also going to just ask all of us to have your microphones close to your mouth when you're using it, and please remember that when you're not speaking, if you'd please turn your microphones off. Next, if we could ask the secretary to give the instructions to those who wish to speak to the board today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Before we begin public comment for the High-Speed Rail Board of Directors meeting, I would like to go over some important information. For members of the public who have joined us in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called upon in the order that we have received your card. If you are joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called upon in the order that their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt on the screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn to speak, please speak slowly and clearly. Say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you are representing. Mr. Chairman, we do not have any in-person speakers today, so we'll start with the Zoom participants.
Please.
Our first speaker will be Roland.
Good morning, Roland.
Good morning, Chair.
Yes, good
Can
morning.
you hear me?
We hear you fine.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Richard, board members, Roland from Brown, San Jose. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to attract your attention to slide 4 of the budget presentation, which shows that CP1 and CP23 have accumulated a total of $9 billion in change orders, with CP1 now at 500% over budget and CP23 at 400% over budget. This is very similar to what happened to High Speed 2 in the UK with the following differences. First, the project was fully funded before the start of construction. Second, cost overruns are currently at 100%. Over budget, with some estimates as high as 200%. Third, the government initiated Project Blue Diamond to reduce the scope of the project, including mothballing the Euston Station terminus in London. And last but not least, the board terminated Mark Thurston HS2 chief executive a couple of weeks ago without any succession plan. In closing, my question to the chair is whether we have a succession plan in place should Mr. Kelly elect to announce his retirement. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Jonathan Powell.
Hi, I am Jonathan Powell. I want to voice my support for the project, especially the completion of the guideway in CP4. During your last board meeting, I was coming back from the US from Europe after taking trains from Paris to Copenhagen. The highlight of the trip to me was taking the French TGV going 200 miles per hour between Paris and Frankfurt. I'd like to remind the board that this is a foreign to most Americans and continue on with this work, especially getting a section operational so that the public themselves can experience this. I would also like to recommend that the board, if not cost prohibitive, look into seating that can always face the direction of travel, since typical Americans are not accustomed to facing backwards in terrain travel. Thank you.
We have no additional speakers.
All right, thank you. We'll now move on to the published agenda for today's meeting. Item number 1 is the approval of the June 29th minutes. If there are no changes or additions.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor? Oh, excuse me. Call the roll, please.
Director Shane,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea, Director Gilmetti,
I need to abstain.
Director Escutia, Director Williams, Director Cohen.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we have 4. We would need 5 for a quorum.
All right, why don't we do this? We'll pick this up later in the meeting today when we've got the Director Perea and or Director Cohen on board.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to item number 1. Item number 2. I'll tell you what, Brian, what I'd like to do is probably also go out of order on this one, and also since this is an action item. So what we're going to do is start with item number 3. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason we're doing this is we don't have a quorum. We know that 2 of our, do we? Yeah, okay, we do have a quorum. Okay. Yes, I understand. Yeah, that's what we'll do on we're gonna go to procurement now. Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry. Okay. All right. It was corrected anyway. I've been, as it's been pointed out to me by the CEO, because we don't have anybody who would have to recuse themselves on the budget, Brian, but we'll go back to item number 1, the minutes for June 29th. So is Director Cohen on board?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's just call for the vote for approval of the minutes. Again, Mr. Secretary, please call the roll.
Yes, sir.
We can't.
All right, the CEO has taken responsibility for that one. We're going to do that shortly. Well, it's one to one right now. So anyway,
Mr.
Oh,
Chairman,
if we can bring Mr. Annis back.
Mr. Chairman, in order to move the minutes along and just move the proceedings along, would it be proper for me to perhaps provide a courtesy yes vote?
No, I think it's fine. We'll be just fine. We'll
Okay.
just go ahead because you can vote on the next item, which
Right.
is the 23-24 budget. So
Okay.
please come back up. And don't talk about our incompetence, please.
Well, good. Good morning, board members. So I'm coming to you with an annual action item. For a board policy 11-001. Direct staff to come to the board for budget approval. So each year about this time, we come and ask for approval of the fiscal year budgets. We're proposing a 23-24 capital budget of about $1.8 billion and a 23-24 fiscal year administrative budget of $95 million. So in this presentation, we'll just go through the budget package the legislature recently enacted and the governor signed, review the revenues available to fund fiscal year expenditures, and go through some of the proposed expenditures for the budget year. On the next slide. Let's see, one more slide forward. Recently, the governor did sign the 2023 Budget Act. The main bill was Senate Bill 101. And in that bill, there was inclusion of state operations funding for the High-Speed Rail Authority, Prop 1A appropriation for administration. And we also have a cap and trade authority for administration. So that legislative approved budget package for our operations is $95.2 million. We also have continuing funding for our capital budget. It was not in SB 101 because we're appropriated for capital on a multi-year or continuous basis with the Proposition 1A bill that the legislature passed last year that released the final $4.2 million of Prop 1A bond funds. And then the cap and trade authorization goes back to 2014, and that's a continuous appropriation. There were some budget trailer bills that impact the authority as well. I mentioned here SB 146 that has to do with a NEPA assignment. In the CEO report, there's a little more detail on this bill and the second bill, so I'm going to defer that discussion to the CEO report. But to mention here, the budget package did include both the appropriations needed for our fiscal year budget and some trailer bill legislation that's helpful to moving our project along. Next slide. We did come to the board in March after the project update report was released and proposed a change to our multi-year program budget, which the board approved. So this is a summary of the board approved program budget or expenditure authorization, which is $20 billion. Today, I'm not requesting any change to this program budget. It's rather the fiscal year slice of activities that's consistent with this budget the board approved in March. Next slide. We do have sufficient revenues to support the fiscal year budget. We reported to the F&A committee this morning that our cash balances are currently almost $3.2 billion. We also are supported in our fiscal year budget by some of the recent federal grants. We have about 13 million of budgeted expenditures from the first two of the RAISE grants. We've been awarded 7 million for the Merced extension design contract and 6 million for the Highway 46 project that we're doing in coordination with Caltrans. Lastly, we also have incoming cap and trade auction proceeds. Those auctions are quarterly, so next one will be in August. So we do expect to have inflow of additional cap and trade revenue between $750 million to $1 billion. And lastly, we have about $3.4 billion of Prop 1A bond authority that is represents unsold bonds, but bonds that have been authorized by the legislature to support our Central Valley construction and also our bookend projects. Next slide. So our proposed budget for capital is listed here by major categories and also fund type. So project development, we have a budget of 167 million. That does include the development or design advancement for the Merced extension, the Bakersfield extension, finishing the remaining environmental segments, Palmdale to Burbank and LA to Anaheim. And then our construction budget here is about $1.5 billion with the fund sources listed, primarily Prop 1A would be utilized. And finally, we have the bookend projects at a budget of around $200 million. And the two projects that are drawing money primarily right now are the Caltrain electrification and the Rosecrans Marquardt project. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the legislative approved budget, governor's proposed budget for our admin, $95.2 million. And here we list how that's allocated among the various offices at High Speed Rail, program delivery, our construction and project development branches make up almost half of our expenditures or budgeted plan at about $41 million, followed by information technology, administration, and finance. I will mention as the budget does include some mechanisms for the Department of Finance to adjust the budget slightly after enactment for things such as healthcare related benefits or negotiated agreements with unions, et cetera. So this 95.2 million will likely get adjusted in a small amount come January by the Department of Finance. Next slide. So that concludes the presentation. Again, this is an action item. So there's a resolution in the materials, and the request is that the board approve a 23-24 capital budget of $1,825 million and approve the administrative budget of $95.2 million.
Thank you,
I-
Mr. Ennis. Director Schenk.
Thank you, Brian. Just on the cap and trade, I'm just curious, this anticipated revenue, is that based on historical data? And is this sort of a conservative approach, or are we thinking that it's going to be even more than it's been in the past?
Yeah, it's I believe the last 4 auctions have exceeded 900 million of revenue for the authority. So it's definitely been on the upswing. The settlement prices in the auctions since the recovery from COVID have been higher than they were before. So they're fairly, I think the floor price for cap and trade, or the minimum price, is something around $22, $23. And we've been seeing settlement prices of about $28 a credit. So yeah, it continues to be robust. All the credits offered for a sale have been selling in recent times. So our project update report did use the same range of 750 million a year to $1 billion a year. And again, recent experience over the past year or two has been closer to the $1 billion a year mark. Yeah.
Any other questions for our CFO? We have a motion for approval. Is there a second? Second, please call the roll.
Director Schenk,
Yes.
Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea, Director Gilmetti,
Aye.
Director Escutia, Director Williams, Director Cohen.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, before we move on to the next item, we'll go back to the minutes. And so if we can just start this all over. So do we have a motion for approval of the June minutes? Okay. Yeah. Okay. And we have a second, so please call the roll.
Director Schenk, Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
Vice Chair Miller,
Yes.
Director Perea, Director Gometi,
Abstain.
Director Escutia, Director Williams, Director Cohen.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Moving. Moving on to item number 3 is the procurement strategy, and Mr. Armistead and Mr. Casey, good morning.
Good morning. We are pleased to update the board on the progress of several key procurements. In the second half of 2020, next slide, please. In the second half of 2023 and early half of 2024, we will advance key procurements to ensure that our program is delivered in the timelines outlined in the project update report, as well as our agreements with the Federal Railroad Administration. The procurements will include design and installation of track and systems where civil works are completed, the train sets, rolling stock for testing and commissioning, and revenue service operations, as well as additional related procurements. These additional procurements include, but are not limited to, construction management, independent cost estimators, integrators, independent safety assessor, and the designing and construction of depots and maintenance facilities. This procurement strategy reflects lessons learned from prior procurements and updated industry input we have received throughout this process. We'll speak more on these lessons learned in the next slide, but examples include implementing strategy for smaller contracts, increased flexibility, as well as emphasis on maximizing the qualified bidder pools. Lessons learned: a priority for our procurements is to ensure that we will apply all the knowledge that we gain from previous procurements and not repeat the mistakes of the past. There are several core principles for the upcoming track and systems procurement. Overall, we are pursuing more contracts with smaller sizes, and our initial efforts will focus on advancing the work in construction package 4 area, avoiding larger contracts in favor of smaller packages, which I will discuss later in detail later in this presentation. It is important for increasing the pool of competitive bids, especially in economic environments where bidding on a fixed price contract for 10 years may be difficult. The authority will only authorize further work packages as we are ready for them in order to foster better communication and interactions between the authority and its contractors. Our aim is to procure scope under multiple packages. The prior track and systems procurement sought a single large contract. However, by dividing the scope into multiple packages, we're hoping to avoid some of the risks assumed by undertaking one contract, mainly from cost and expertise perspective. We're also going to be utilizing more innovative, flexible delivery methods for each scope element. This will help to minimize the risk of change orders that can result from lump sum fixed price approach. This also is moving the authority in the direction of industry trends, and industry is also shifting away from traditional fixed price bid build, design build delivery methods. It will also allow the authority to be more flexible and have more control over the design when appropriate. And lastly, it will provide a better opportunity to reliably manage implementation schedules and to meet our federal deadlines. The last core principle is the recognition of risks that should be retained by the authority to ensure delivery of a certified, safe, high-speed railroad. Our process. We have carefully developed a procurement strategy approach in order to ensure a successful delivery of the future rail infrastructure and train sets. This strategy has been developed over a course of 9 months with intense work conducted by our team in collaboration with international high-speed rail experts. And we have also conducted outreach and received significant input from industry and peer agencies. And I'd like to acknowledge Rachel Wong, who's the lead of our procurement group, for all their hard work on this. The strategy also makes sure to take into account the post-COVID market conditions, as well as feedback from prior track and systems debrief meetings and market sounding feedback and a variety of industry participants. The approach also ensures that the interests of the authority will continue to be of the utmost importance while minimizing the possible risks. Lastly, the strategy takes into account lessons learned from previous procurements. This includes lessons from current civil construction packages, the prior track and systems procurement, and projects and owners from the US and international high-speed rail community. And HS2 and Crossrail was mentioned, HS2 was mentioned in one of the public comments. So we have been communicating with them and having lessons learned from their experience. And at this time, I pass the mic to Mr. Casey to talk about alternate delivery methods.
Good morning. So can you go to the next slide, please? So we talk about our proposed delivery methods. We're looking at 3 different types of delivery: traditional design bid build, construction manager, general contractor, and progressive design build. With design bid build, it involves 2 procurements, one for designer, one for contractor. And it's done through a competitive process with the contractor. And that's the areas we'll be looking to do that is things that are straightforward, like the depots, the facilities, and so forth. The 2 alternate delivery methods we're looking at, construction manager and general and progressive design build. For the construction manager, general contractor, we procure the design. Excuse me. Oh, sure. Sorry about that. Okay, thank you. For construction manager, general contractor, we will have 3 procurements, one for a design consultant through an RFQ process, a contractor also through an RFQ process, and an independent cost estimator as part of the process. And the examples of where we would use construction manager, general contractor, things like the track and civil works, track bed, track, OCS systems, overhead catenary system. Those are the areas we're considering that method. For progressive design build, that's really where that really has value is more of a contractor design or supplier driven design. So we're looking at it's 2 procurements, one for design services through an RFQ and a contractor also through an RFQ process. And we'd be looking at that for more of the supplier driven design parts of the system, signaling, train control, core communications, and traction power, so forth. We go to the next slide. So design bid build, it's of course the traditional delivery process. It involves 2 procurements, an RFQ for the designer and a competitive bid for the contractor. And you can see the flow, how the work would go, where we would produce a plan specification estimate package. Then we move to what we call ready to list. And what ready to list does is we would have a checkbox at that point to make sure we have all our environmental permitting in place, our right-of-way in place, our construction easements, utilities relocated, and all third-party clearances at that point. So we would go out with a package that's complete and ready to go. And then we would move to advertise, and typically it's awarded to lowest bidder. And then that bidder becomes the general contractor that constructs the work. On the next slide. The benefits, is one, the authority takes control of design. The first step to getting the quality you want is controlling the design. That's very important. The contract is awarded to the lowest responsible bidders, so it's very competitive. It allows more fairness to bidders, more people can compete. Also, it establishes market prices for the work. It tells you what the market's thinking the cost of the work really is. Some of the challenges, it's a unilateral contract, so it can rise to more disagreements with the contractor and what the contract says and what's contained in the contract. The authority also becomes a mediator between the contractor and the designer settling disputes. Because for those who've done design build projects, there's always disputes and there's always finger pointing. We would have to then resolve those conflicts and resolve those issues. Also, the one drawback, the contract really has no input at this point to the design process. So it does limit contractor innovation. However, it does not preclude value engineering change proposals a contractor can suggest during the life of the contract. So that is still an option, but it's done at a later stage. Move to the next slide, please. Sure.
Before you go to the next slide, still on page 8,
Sure.
what do you mean by a hard bid? And what role do change orders have in
So-
basically making those bids not that hard?
So basically, the contract bids in a series of bid items for the work. You're designing a building or a roadway or a bridge or a guideway, whatever it may be, and you'll have a series of items of work they have to do. They give a hard price for each of those items. They could be lump sums, they could be one each or things like that. So that's your hard bid. Now, change orders come into play when you have disagreements, when you find a defect in the plans or specifications, or we have an unknown utility that pops up they didn't expect, and now you have to pay the contractor to work around to deal with it. So change orders aren't necessarily going to happen, but there's a higher probability they do happen with hard bids because it's a non-collaborative. It's us putting out the design plans and specifications, and then the contractor bidding on, this is it, take it or leave it. So not having their input can actually rise to more change orders and schedule growth.
So if this process sounds like it leads to disagreements,
It can, yes.
would you suggest that we need to change our approach and do something different than this process?
No, this is traditionally how most contracts are done. And not every contract sees cost and schedule growth, but difficult contracts, you do something unique and different you haven't done before. You go out to a little bit of the unknown and you can have problems pop. But for most projects, my background with Caltrans, most design bid build projects work very well, but there are those that do see cost and schedule growth.
Dr. Scutia,
Yes.
just to be clear, you may already know this, but I just want to be clear too, that the design bid build process is not one that we're using today. The one we're using today is just design build on the contract. So this one has not been in use.
Again, one of the things that you're doing is you're defining methods of delivery. You're giving us a definition of each, but what I was looking for is to find out what we're going to be using specifically on the upcoming procurements so that we can better understand the process that we're going to be using. But
That's coming. That's coming.
Each one of these is different, and we don't have a cookie cutter approach to saying we will use this for all of them. So it would be helpful for us to understand of our upcoming procurements, how are we going to use it? If we're looking at the design, which procurement process would we be using? And will they vary depending on the scope of work?
They will absolutely vary. We're going to look at the complexity, the type of the work. For instance, design bid build, we're considering for things like the facilities and depots that are relatively easy to design and build. The track and the track work, the ballast, the OCS system, we're looking at using CMGC because we want that collaboration with the contractor and we want to control the design. When it comes to the signaling system, the traction power, we're looking at using progressive design build because that's more of a contractor driven or really a supplier driven design. So that's where we're looking to leverage these methods to the best interest of the authority.
That's kind of what I was looking for, to tell us what type are you going to be using for the upcoming procurements, and that's going to be helpful.
Director Camacho,
Yes.
just as we go through this, I think when Bruce comes back up, you'll see the application of each for the upcoming procurements. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that Martha's, Scutia's comment was, you were defining a method of delivery, she was thinking that you've defined that as, because it was problematic. I think we've had experiences with design bid, and we've been paying a price for it. Maybe, and if we're going to continue to use that, I think you may have some pushback from board members.
So we're not using design build. That this is not design.
Okay,
This design
that's-
bid build, you have a complete design when we get a price from the contractor. The difference is the design builds, you didn't have a complete design. So how do you put a cost and schedule to something that's incomplete?
That's true.
We will have a complete design for design bid build.
Thank you.
If I may follow up, and it was something that was in the back of my mind as Mr. Armistead was testifying. And that is that obviously, this is a major public works project, you know, with a lot of money that gives us opportunity to leverage. So my question to you is, or to Mr. Armistad, is as you're designing the process for the tracking systems, at which point in your mind does the issue of diversity of procurement come in?
Early in the process. Let me let him answer it because he has some
I will
slides.
go
at the
through
end.
that in my slides.
Okay,
after
all right.
Bill gets
I'm sorry
through
for
his-
jumping ahead. Thank you
yeah,
so much.
we have-
Thank you.
But it is a thought out process and a collaborative environment that we come up with it. So moving forward, the slide 9. So the construction manager, general contractor process, it's an alternate delivery process, involves 3 procurements. We procure designer through a request for qualifications process. We procure the CMGC entity, the contractor, through an RFQ process as well. And an independent cost estimator is part of an RFQ process. And you can see in the flow chart down below how it'll work. With you put an RFQ for the CMDC entity, then we would go through a RFQ process and award it to the highest qualified person or highest qualified entity. And then we would move into the design phase, working with our designer, and the contractor then becomes the construction manager, and work through the design phase together, work towards price agreement. We have price agreement. Then we can move to award a contractor a notice to proceed. And then the contractor then becomes the general contractor. Next slide. So as far as, when you award it to a construction manager, general contractor entity, the first initial notice to proceed, it's called the pre-construction services. And here they're the construction manager, and there's a series of things they would provide, from cost estimating to subcontracting plans, scheduling, support, material procurement, how we would procure the materials, utility coordination, construction phasing, constructability reviews, risk analysis. It's incredibly important to get that out early and address risk. Quantity verification, also work with us on third-party approvals to be able to move the contract forward. Once that's complete and we have a full design package, then we can negotiate a price with the contractor. And if we agree to the price, they would then become the general contractor and construct the work. We also have the option to off-ramp at any point. If we feel we can negotiate a price with the contractor, we can put it out to bid competitively, so choose. Next slide, please. This is also a very open and transparent process where the authority shares our plans and specifications. The contractor is involved in development of both. And the estimating, the contractor provides open book estimating. They're sharing their assumptions, their risks. So we know very well what their price is based on. Whereas design bid build, you have a series of specifications and plans they bid on. Well, anywhere there might be gray areas or areas of disagreement or not fully understanding, this avoids all that. It's a wide open conversation, open book. You know very well what their price is based on. It's more collaborative, where the contractor assists in developing solutions. And its approach to risk is very much, very proactive. Early identification of risks, we identify the impacts, the costs, the schedule, and we work together how we manage those risks and minimize those costs and schedule impacts to the contract. Next slide, please. One of the benefits of CMGC and progressive design build, also the same benefit, is you can do early work packages. While we're designing it, we can go order long lead time materials to get ahead of the schedule. We can do early utility work. We can also construct an independent portion of the work, meaning if you have a job that's 65 miles long, you can go build a few bridges and get it out of the way early. You want to do something that is not tied to the rest, so you can still off-ramp to design, bid, build, or some other competitive process if you so choose. In doing so, we want to clearly define the scope and schedule, establish, as I said, the independent utility among the other work, where we can maintain the severability option if we so choose to move forward with a competitive process after the design is complete. And we want to make sure we define the size of that early work, something that's manageable and keeps full engagement of the whole process. Next slide, please. Now, when you get to price agreement, so as I said, this is open book. They share their information. The authority produces its own cost estimate. The contractor, in this case, they'll be the construction manager. They'll produce their cost estimate, and then we'll have an independent cost estimate done as well through a third party. And we work to reconcile those estimates. If we can come to a fair price agreement, then we have the opportunity to move forward to the next stage, would be a construction contract. If we feel it's not a fair price and we can't come to agreement, we maintain the ability to off ramp and move to a competitive process at that point and put it out to the industry. Next slide, please. Some of the benefits here. This helps with faster delivery. It really eliminates the advertisement period associated with design bid build. You can easily save 3 to 6 months of time to get it out to the world. It also allows for the early work packages, which also help out. It improves design quality through the collaboration with the contractor. Creates more opportunity for innovation and value engineering during design. It also lets us suggest specialized qualifications, pre-qualify subcontractors for specialized work. It is a huge benefit in risk mitigation. Again, if we don't agree on a price, we can off ramp. But the biggest point I want to make is it gives a higher degree of cost and schedule, leading to less cost and schedule growth because it is collaborative in nature. Some of the challenges, reconciling price, low bid versus a negotiated price. There'll be higher support costs, upfront costs from the pre-construction phase because you're going to pay the contractor time, material to provide their services, as well as independent cost estimator. So you're moving price cost elements from the construction portion further up into the pre-construction phase. And of course, it's always a challenge when you're dealing with a single bidder, coming to price agreement.
Bill,
Next slide.
you've used
Sure.
this system before somewhere in your career, correct?
I have, for those who drove up on I-80, 680, 8024, 680, 8012 interchange was a CMGC contract we did with Kiewit. The Bay Bridge Foundations, the implosion, we have Brian Roney who did that. He's in the back of the room. Those implosions were done CMGC. And I've been on a few other panels. In my previous life as the director of construction in the Bay Area, I also had several CMGCs underneath me. The Google lanes on Highway 101 in San Mateo. And Santa Clara was also a CMGC
Google
contract.
lanes?
Well, I use an acronym. It's the express lanes. I apologize. It's a simple acronym.
And how did that 680/80 come out,
It-
estimate wise and schedule wise?
It turned out very well. We had very minimal cost and schedule growth, and it was incredibly collaborative where we maintained the cost. We had a very fixed budget. It was supported by STA. They had the funding for it and they had a limited budget. We were able to bring it in under budget. So it was very collaborative. It worked very well.
Thank you.
So progressive design build. We can go back to slide 15, please. This is also an alternate delivery process. It's very similar to CMGC. The only real difference here is that the contractor designer is one entity. We put a procurement out for a designer / contractor through an RFQ process. And we'll also have an independent cost estimator. So there's 2 procurements here. With the way we're moving forward with the series of different work, we'll probably have one procurement for single ICE for all of our CMGC and progressive design build work for the tracking systems. And you can see the flow of how the work will go. The progressive design build procurement will have the request for qualifications. Then we'll award a contract based on the highest qualifications. We move into the design phase. They'll design it and then we'll work on the price agreement. We get price agreement, then we can move into the award phase and construct the work. Go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is basically the same pre-construction services and construction services CMDC with the one difference. The contractor entity will develop the complete design. And one thing, it's very collaborative. We're paying for that design at time material. It's not a low bid design. We pay time material. We have the ability to tell them what we want and get what we want. And really the benefit here is when you have something that's specially designed, like the traction power system, the signaling system, it actually brings in those suppliers to help design it together. So it's a huge benefit. Move to the next slide, please.
Can I just ask a
Sure.
question? This looks a lot like design build.
With one exception. It's not a low bid. It is very similar to design build, you're correct, but we're paying for the design work at time material. It's not low bid and it's a negotiated price.
And is it possible to have the designer and the contractor be a single entity?
Yes, yeah, this is used throughout the US, progressive design build. I believe San Francisco Airport just did a contract that was progressive design build. I know, I believe Utah and Colorado used it quite a bit. And I believe Caltrans just got legislation to use progressive design build as well.
They did. Our experience has been that wasn't a great way to proceed. So I'm assuming that you've improved this package on our lessons learned that Mr. Armistead was
So,
talking about.
so the big difference is, the design build contracts are based, I believe, on 15% plans.
Right.
We're going to negotiate a price based on 100%
Oh,
plans.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. Okay.
And
So
we're also
that's a
not
huge
going to go
difference.
out without
Okay,
right
thank
away
you.
procured
Okay.
utilities and third-party agreements.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
I think you were thinking about even CP 23.
Right.
where they
Okay.
have that. We have a designer mixed with the contract.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
okay. Go to the next slide, please. Price agreement is very similar to CMGC, where you have the authority produce the cost estimate, the contract designer will produce a cost estimate, and we'll have an independent cost estimator. And if we come to agreement, again, we can move forward the contract. If we don't, we still have the ability to off-ramp to another method. Next slide, please. The benefits and challenges are very similar to CMGC. The one big benefit is a single point of responsibility for design and construction. Ideally, when a contractor and designer are on the same team, they'll work better together. So our job is to make sure they do that. And paying for the design time material gives them incentive to do that, where they will work together. And then also it leads to a higher degree of cost and schedule certainty with less costs and schedule growth, which is a huge value. And otherwise, the remaining benefits and challenges are very similar. And with that, I'm going to pivot back to Bruce, but I want to see if you had any questions on the three methods before I hand it back to Bruce to take you a little further in how we're moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. This was very good, and you answered so many of the questions that had popped up in my mind as I reviewed this. But one question, in terms of your resources, the staff resources, I mean, this seems that it will take more staff time than the old way. Do you have that? What do you need? How can we be helpful?
We are adding resources. We're coming out with additional consultant contracts to support, but it does add a little more upfront resources. The benefit is, that you should have less cost and schedule growth in construction, which is a huge value.
Yeah. So, Brian, in terms of staffing and
Yeah. So this
the
is
right kind of people to oversee this and do this,
Right.
the
So
sophisticated.
yeah, you'll see we've got a lot of procurements that are up and coming. One of the reasons to bring somebody like Bill Casey in is because he's used some of these methods before. And so we are both expanding the capacity of the authority itself through a VCP process, which you're well familiar with. And that you'll hear Bruce talk about a couple of contracts that we have, one out on the streets now, which is the rail engineering services contract that will help with some of the oversight management of these contracts, as well as what's called the integrator, which will help integrate the separate contracts as we move forward in the process. So Bruce will go into some of these now, but yes, the early capacity improvements that we make to manage and oversee this, we think will result in less of what we've seen in terms of cost and delay issues before.
Yeah.
And so we're putting that together and moving forward on that.
Okay.
And now that we've heard a number of things about the delivery methods and how some of the tools, progressive delivery tools that are available to us, I'm going to talk through how we'll use those tools to assure that we deliver a safe, reliable railroad. I'm going to provide an overview of the packaging that you see on the screen there. Our tracking systems, train sets, and related scopes. We will review packages 1 through 3 in further detail on the next slides, but I'll give you a brief overview of packages 4 and 5 now. As Bill mentioned, package 4 will cover all depots and facilities. This will include a training center and a driving simulator and the operations control center with the scope detail, training center, driving simulator, and operations control center. The scope details of this package are still being evaluated and discussed by the team, and this package is not projected until 2025. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see additional related contracts that will address the program-wide support for tracking systems and train set. And this gets to the earlier question about staffing and support. First, the independent cost estimator or the ICE, which is required by the state of California when negotiating a price with contractors under the progressive delivery methods. Second will be the construction manager, who will be responsible for overseeing the construction, including managing documentation, being on site and reporting updates and more. It's important to note here that the construction manager will not have responsibility in managing the contract. This will be performed by the authority state staff. Third is integration support, which will help to manage and support the integration efforts among the various work streams and contracts. Fourth is an independent safety assessor, which plays a key role in certification to achieve revenue service. The ISA will report directly to the FRA. This role is identified in the Code of Federal Regulations as a third-party assessor. Next slide, please. Yes, yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Amistad, before you go to the next slide, can you just please again repeat what you said about the construction manager? That the construction manager will not manage the project, but rather it would be our high-speed rail staff? Did I hear right?
Yes, we will have state staff as contract managers. The construction manager will be responsible for assuring that the work that's being performed, installation of the signaling, installation of the OCS, installation of the track, is being done in a way that it meets our requirements. And then we'll have state staff that will be the state contract managers.
Do you feel confident that you have the resources you need in terms of state staff to make that happen?
We are hiring right now.
Okay.
So
One
does that mean
question.
you're hiring from whatever the resource or the sources are, not necessarily existing state employees, but rather you're going to whatever the private sector, anywhere else to find the people with the experience to accomplish the
That is
intentions here?
correct. Right
Okay.
now, we have, I have vacancies in my organization that I'm trying to fill. One gentleman I introduced last week, we got from Caltrans Division of Rail, who has extensive experience in buying train sets for the state. So we're continuing our recruitment efforts to hire state staff to be in those responsible positions that have the requisite experience to build and install, well, to manage the building and installation of high-speed rail systems.
I just think there's a point of clarification that's needed here for the board members too, is that, just to be clear, all contracts with contractors are managed by state staff.
Right.
Today at the authority, and we will continue that. So I just want to be clear on that.
Mr. Armistead, we're past the civil work, and I understand that we could hire state staff on the civil side because Caltrans has a lot of experience in building highways and bridges, things like that. But we've now graduated into a different area, which is very, very specialized.
Yes.
So, and that specialty is probably comes more from Europe, since they have high-speed rail there. We have none.
Yes.
So how do you plan to recruit state staff that have never had the experience in dealing with high-speed rail? And especially when we're talking about the tracking systems and the integration of such. So it seems to me that we would be better off in some senses to hire private contractors that have the experience in this area to be able to supplement what we are lacking.
We're doing both. We're doing both. Our rail systems engineering contract, which was advertised on Tuesday, will help us to have the staff to manage the requirements. And I'm working with administration and the personnel group to have the proper classifications of positions so that I can attract world-class talent to build the high-speed system. So there's a lot of work to do on our side to get the classifications right, because within the state system, I've been limited by the classifications, and we're working to remedy that so that we can get the right staffers in place to do the work.
Bruce, if I can add one other thing to this though, is that
I don't want to belabor the question, but if in fact we don't, if the recruitment of staff doesn't meet those qualifications, I hope then we have a plan B to look at outside of
Yes, we
as
do,
an
sir. And as I
alternative?
go through the slides, you'll see the
Okay.
support
Thank
that
you.
we're hoping to have.
Yeah, I think the other thing just worth commenting on here is that the authority and recognition that we're building something that has not been built really anywhere in America before in terms of electrified high-speed rail is we are moving forward and we will continue to move forward with a combination of state and contract services because there is some specialization that's required. And the recess contract is the best example that Bruce just laid out of where we need that direct high-speed rail oversight and expertise on what we're building and how we're meeting the standards for electrified high-speed rail. And that's largely coming from firms with international experience.
So I mean, I think everybody is supportive of utilizing state staff in these roles that there are the qualifications and experience. But I do think that what Director Camacho is saying, this is a different animal with high-speed rail. So we're looking for experience. I would think you're looking for experience in these areas with people who have high-speed rail experience, not just experience on say Caltrain at 69 miles an hour. The people who have experience on high-speed rail at 220 miles an hour.
Yes, sir. We
Okay.
are absolutely doing that.
Okay, and in those roles as the managers, as Brian pointed out, the managers are state employees. I think that it is what the intent is.
Right.
And that's all well and good, but we've got to have the experience for those people to be in those roles.
Yes, we have, that is our intention. And as was asked
Okay.
earlier by
Okay.
Board Member Scuccia, the
Okay,
construction management folks will have the requisite experience, and then the people who are overseeing their work will have the enough experience to know that what they're being told is correct.
okay, carry on, please.
All right, I'm gonna give a little detail for the package one. So moving forward into the detailed view of packages 1, 2, and 3. Package 1 relates to the track and overhead contact system. This includes civil works, track bed, as well as OCS. It consists of package 1A, which is the design of the 171 miles, where the designer will provide and manage input. Package 1B, which is the construction management general contractor contract for 119 miles, which provides the framework to add future extensions, Merced to Bakersfield, to complete the 171. The separation of contracts for design and construction management and general contractor provides critical benefits. First, it allows the authority to retain ownership and control of the design. It also enables the authority to start small, focusing on efforts for the construction package CP4 area, as well as controlling the timing of long lead items. Importantly, it creates more control on the authority side over processes, including authorization of future sections, which the authority will have the power to green light whenever ready, and if the contractor is performing to the standards set forth by the contract. And as was mentioned by Bill, we will have to assure that we're getting the best value by ICE, our estimate, and the designer's estimate.
Hey, Bruce, can I just jump in on one thing here?
Yeah.
Just structurally for the board, I think what's important, one thing that you see here is Bruce mentioned the separation before. We were out on a rather large track and systems contract starting in 2019 that went through 2022 and was highly disrupted by the COVID experience in terms of what went on in the marketplace, what the market can and cannot respond to. But what you're seeing here, what I wanted to just highlight for a minute for the board members is one of the things we learned through that process, in addition to if you're going out so far on some stuff, it's very difficult to get certainty of price on supply. Certainly in a market where you're talking about building stuff that might be 6, 7, 8 years out. So that was one issue. The second issue was when we held it all together, we were losing the benefit of having a number of bidders on some of the simpler work versus the more sophisticated work. And so one of the things you're seeing here, and the key lesson learned that's in this proposal here is, my favorite example is the separation of track and overhead systems from the systems and signaling systems. And I say that because many firms can build track and they can build the overhead wires. Very few firms can do the sophistication of the signaling, the communications, and that kind of system that comes on the train. When we had them together, the result of that was less on the simple work. Separating them out, we're looking to maximize bidder on the simple work, then deal with the sophisticated parties on the more sophisticated work. And so that's just one of the, I think it's the clearest example of how we're trying to separate this out to gain some benefits in the procurement process that we didn't see last year, and also be responsive to what those bidders and the market told us since COVID struck. And so I just wanted to flag that that's why you're seeing the structure this way.
I think also the other thing that, or something else that comes to mind is, in the past, we heard a lot about, and how we ended up moving in the direction of trying to find a single bidder or single contractor that was going to be, for instance, doing all the track. The concern was back then, and it may not have been a valid concern, but we were certainly hearing about it needed to be, and that was, how do you integrate what one contractor's done with the next contractor in line?
Right. We have and I'll be talking about the integration
Okay.
contract in
And
a
the
few
warranties
slides.
that go along with all of that.
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
sir. So lastly, the manageable, this separation enables manageable interfaces and integration between the various contracts. Let's go on to 22, please. Let's move on to to discuss package 2, which focuses on systems such as signaling, train control, core communications, traction power systems, supervisory control, and data acquisition, or SCADA as we call it. All the technical systems will fall under package 2. So all the things that Bill mentioned as proprietary design, those will all fall, and the very sophisticated packages will fall in package 2. The sophisticated work of signaling, communications, SCADA, traction power systems will all be in package 2. This single contract with progressive delivery for 119 miles, similar to package 1, there's progressive authorization for the work packages and notices. The progressive design construction management approach was chosen in order to promote good interaction between the authority and the systems designer, mainly on costs, phasing, and construction methodology. This too provides a framework to add further extensions to Merced to Bakersfield. Expanding on the benefits of a single track system, a single contract for systems. This approach keeps the management of the progress of work within the authority's program capacity. And based on the availability of construction packages, this means that we can negotiate work packages progressively instead of upfront lump sum price. We'll also be able to manage interfaces and integration between the contracts and be involved in design decisions while also maintaining the flexibility to make changes as needed. Lastly, it allows us to combine design with the supply, installation, and construction to better mitigate integration, commissioning, and certification risks. This is necessary due to technically complex nature and the proprietary nature of the system scope. Package 3. This is a single supply and maintain contract for 6 train sets. Furthermore, it includes relevant designs for package 3. The authority plans to procure high-speed train sets that are capable of operating at 220 miles an hour. The order will include 2 prototype train sets that are scheduled to be delivered in 2028 to support static and dynamic testing, as well as initial trial running. This will be focused on the delivery of 4 train sets by the end of 2030 to support revenue service. Lastly, we'll need the train set designs and prototypes to progress together with the design and installation of track and systems. This will help mitigate issues with critical interfaces. Vehicle train interaction is a very big deal when you start running at 220 miles an hour. So you want to design the systems and the rolling stock concurrently so that you can manage the vehicle track interaction. There's a lot of detail around the profile of the wheel along with the shape of the railhead. So those two things have to be designed together so that we can assure that we have a safe, reliable railroad. And there are details for all that in the requirements that we'll be following in order to reach a certified railroad. And you may have heard me speak last time and when I talked about the RESIS contract about the European normatives and how those standards and specifications are what we're going to follow. Those standards and specifications are in the CFRs. There's 49 CFR 200 to 299 includes all the requirements for us to meet the European normatives, and FRA is on board with us moving in this direction because it is in the Code of Federal Regulations.
Bruce, just a curiosity question. We're the first one that's under construction for high-speed rail in the US, but others are considering Brightline and others. Are we all designing to the same gauge and the same type of trains?
Yes, we are. And that it excites me to say that we have interoperability agreement with Brightline. We've reached agreement on platform height and offset for the rolling stock. We're also reached agreement on the what our rolling stock, the preliminaries of our rolling stock propulsion systems. So yes, we have interoperability with Brightline and we'll be talking with them more as the weeks come. And I understand there's a workshop being scheduled for September.
So are we sharing that? I know Texas was interested in doing something. Florida was interested in doing something. Are we sharing that information with others?
We're sharing it with the FRA.
Okay.
So the FRA gave us the nod on our interoperability and what we're looking for is a standard, and we're starting with platform height and offset, but there will be other federal standards that we are out in front of along with Brightline and others, but we're kind of paving the way with all this, as you mentioned.
Thank you.
Last slide. So I know we've been through a lot. I've gone over a lot of information, Mr. Kelly and I, and but it boils down to those steps you see in front of you for the way we're going forward. First and foremost, you can expect regular board updates with additional information and details regarding the progress of these work packages and procurements. We anticipate bringing the 8 procurements for approval in 2023 and early 2024. The schedule in front of you is a very aggressive one. And the staff is ready and up to meet this challenge. Package 3, the RFQ for train sets, is coming Q3 of this year. And package 1A for the design and procurement of the overhead systems is also coming Q3 of this year. We plan to bring the procurement for the independent safety assessor during the same timeframe. In Q4, we're expecting to bring back to the board for approval package 1B, which is the CMGC package for track and OCS, and package 2 for the systems procurement, as well as procurements for the ICE, independent cost estimator, and the integration support. You all mentioned that our challenges with personnel and expertise, as we look at bringing on an integrator, as we look at bringing on rail systems engineering support, they will support us in those areas, and they will give us the relevant technical expertise to assure that what we're doing with the integration of these designs, assuring that they're meeting our requirements for a 220-mile-an-hour railroad. These packages that you see before you, the integration support services, the independent cost estimator, the independent safety assessor will all work together. And when I come back with the RESIS contract for your approval, you'll see how all of those work together. And if you may recall, I went through a slide where I worked from the bottom up to show how all of our support contracts roll up to us being the ultimate responsibility for getting a safe, reliable, high-speed railroad. So, and early next year, We're expecting to come back to you with package 3, which is the RFP for train sets. So directly before you, the RFQ for train sets, where we qualify the bidders, and then in the first of next year, we hope to come back with the RFP for train sets. And at this time, Bill and I would like to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Earlier on in the Finance and Audit Committee, we talked about diversity, the inclusion of small minority, women-owned firms, and realizing we have an aspirational goal. But what are we doing? And I think Martha Scutia asked a question about diversity, and you mentioned that it would be included in your presentation that you just made, but there was no mention of diversity and how we're going to look at trying to do outreach to firms outside of the traditional larger firms that we're using.
Yeah, I didn't talk about the details of the procurement process, but we will have pre-bids. And if you directly before us is the pre-bid and small business workshop that is included in the RESIS contract. So each one of these will have a pre-bid and a small business workshop. And we are bound by our own goals for small business participation, along with our funding partner goals, both state and federal, for small business participation.
I just wanted to hear that. I think Martha asked the question and
Yes.
and it was not responded.
Oh,
Thank you.
My apologies.
No, I mean, I just would hope that as you engage in this discussion and actually actions on your part, as well as Bill's part in terms of package, whatever, 3, 4, package 1, whatever, that the issue of diversity is one that's critical. And we really have to take a hard look as to whether we have even come close to our aspirational goals. And if we haven't, why not? So, I mean, I don't need an answer right now, but I would just hope that as you engage in this process, that you keep that top of mind.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions or comments for either Bill or Mr. Armistead? Yes, Director Shank.
Just a comment. It's both exciting and bittersweet, but it's taken 47 years from the time I first brought the concept of high-speed rail to Governor Brown in his first and second terms to this point. It's mind-boggling that it's taken this long, but at least we're here. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Shank. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Great presentation. We appreciate it.
I'd like to thank both presenters. They did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Yes, excellent.
Great, thank you.
All right, we'll now move on to our CEO report, item 4 on the agenda. Mr. Kelly. Sure. Go ahead, Director Galmetti.
I really think with the addition of what Bruce and Bill are doing, are putting high-speed rail back on the right track in terms of controlling cost and design, et cetera. I think we've turned the page, especially going forward. And I do want to congratulate them because I think this is a very positive sign for high-speed rail in California. So thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I will quickly go through some updates that are in the CEO report. I think you've each have the benefit of having seen the PowerPoint presentation, but a couple of developments since our last meeting together that I wanted to just cover with the board. The first is, as Brian Annis mentioned in his budget report, there were 2 trailer bills, we call them here in Sacramento parlance, which is policy bills related to the fiscal stuff that's included in the budget. There were 2 relative to this project. They were actually designed more broadly than just this project, but they are things that we benefit from. The first was the extension of NEPA assignment. Remember that NEPA is the federal process to go through the environmental process. We've had the great benefit of being the entity to do both NEPA and CEQA combined on this project, and it's enabled us to get 6 different segments done in terms of certified environmentally over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. So that was sunsetting. Our MOU was sunsetting later this year with the federal government, and the statutory law was sunsetting, I think, in 2024. So the legislative agreement extended that all the way out to 2033, which is really important for us. We still have to get through Burbank to Palmdale to Burbank and LA to Anaheim in terms of finishing environmental documents. And then there's several issues on other environmental documents, re-exams or other things that you go through, permitting issues you go through. And so maintaining this assignment was very important for the project. And this extension really sets up well for us. The biggest single benefit of NEPA assignment, just for the board's edification, is it's the ability to have decisions made locally and not have to wait for a distant federal government to respond to analysis and reports, but to get them done more quickly, more responsive. We've really saved a ton of time on that. Second issue was relative to legislation on the California Endangered Species Act, a process that again is much more broad than just this project, but it expanded the ability of CDFW and other permitting agencies to work on certain take policies for specific species. In our case, including the blunt-nosed leopard lizard, which has been a species in and around our project. The bill allows for the safe relocation of those species while we advance the project. And so again, this element being something that was part of the budget process, again, much more broad than just our project, but a benefit for our project. So I wanted to mention it to this board. Next slide, please. Many of you have asked me independently about the Inspector General process. Remember, the budget of 2022 included an Inspector General for this project. That process required the legislature to provide 3 nominees to the governor's office, and then the governor's office goes through the vetting of those 3, and the governor chooses the ultimate Inspector General. After about 1 year's time, the legislature did nominate the 3 nominees to the governor's office in June. So the governor's office is now going through the 3, doing their own due diligence and vetting of the 3. I can tell you that each of the 3 had extensive history and experience in auditing. 2 were local government auditors, 1 was a state level auditor. And so the governor's office and the appointments office in the governor's unit is now working through that process. I expect that this will likely be resolved before summer ends. So I think that we'll see an appointment relatively soon, just based on where this is in the process. Again, the governor himself makes the final appointment. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about CP4. This is the construction package, reminding everybody the southernmost 22 miles of the 119-mile stretch we have. This is the one that is the furthest along, and we are getting to what we call guideway and structure completion in August, substantial completion for contractual purposes in October, and full and final completion by the end of 2023. So I just wanted to spend a moment updating the board on where we are on this. Again, we're still on schedule for these points. You will see as we come back in the next board meeting and the next F&A committee, a big bump up in expenditures on CP4, because the contractor is now pretty much working, I almost want to say around the clock, 7 days, 12 hours a day shifts in moving that construction. Again, you'll see the expenditure number virtually double from where it's been to where it is now as we come to the end of that work. There are 2 specific issues that are affecting the schedule there that we are working through. And I just want to be clear with the board. One of them is the semi-tropic water storage district. They have a canal there now that they move water to their clients. And that canal is seeing some cracks. This is not our facilities, but their facilities. And so that canal is seeing some cracking in it. And we ultimately have to move that canal and pivot to a new structure for them. But in order for us to move the work, we were hoping to work through a bypass of that existing canal while we design the new structure. And there's some issue that Semi-Tropic has raised with our ability to do the bypass, because they're worried it'll put some additional pressure on the existing canal. It's truly an engineering question. So the risk to us is, and the option is, we do it as we want to do it, which is do this bypass pipe and continue to work through our new infrastructure there, or we wait for the harvest season to end, shut it down completely and rebuild the new pipe or the new canal in essence. And so we're working with Semi-Tropic on that issue now. I just wanted to raise it because it could have a 3 or 4 week impact on schedule. If we do it our way, we will likely move more quickly. If we wait a little bit, there'll be a 3 or 4 week impact on that. But we will resolve the matter. We're working with Semi-Tropic now on it. We'll go forward. The second one is what we call the North Kern Water District, which has a pipe or canal that goes underneath both the BNSF system and our proposed alignment. And this is one of those things where you're dealing with utilities in the field. You find things that were not identified before. In this case, they found a fiber optic cable that was owned by the telecommunications company down there. It's in direct conflict with where the new canal would be. But for good news is we're worked out a solution that looks like with the water district, where we will likely just lower the depth of the new pipe that we put in and avoid the conflict with the canal. That resolution is something that's been in development. I wasn't sure it was going to be done by the time I'm standing here, but it looks like we're heading toward a resolution on that. So those are the pressures on 4, but again, we are coming to the end of that work on CP4. Just wanted to update the board on those issues. Next slide.
Brian, I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Going back to the critical path that we have for the third-party issues on CP1.
Yep.
I have sent Mr. Kim an email this week just asking for an update in terms of our progress in terms of hitting those milestones that we need to hit this year. And just the question was, how are we doing? Are we achieving those milestones?
Yeah, we did. We updated, it's in the F&A package. We updated the status of all the utility work for all of the CP packages. And I know on the critical path list that we shared with the board last week, that came up through our construction side. I asked the construction side to share that with Dennis Kim's team. And I know that they are scrubbing that list further to make sure all the dates for those potential moves of the utilities for purposes of getting the 4 key critical path things done on CP1 are on track. And I know they're going through that analysis now and that evaluation. I'll just look to Dennis real quick. Is there anything? Come on up if you want to add anything else. I'm happy to have Dennis Kim just add anything else to that, Henry, but I did ask him to take a look at that, and they're scrubbing that list further. We'll come back with more on that soon. But Dennis, if you have anything to add.
Good.
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Perea, for that yesterday. Our team is diligently working to make sure that the information that we're gathering is accurate and up to date. So we'll be providing that shortly after we go through that.
Okay. Now, Brian, the previous presentation from staff, which was excellent. I was going to ask a question there, but I couldn't unmute my mic. I mean, it was exciting to hear all of that information. My question would have been connecting these 2 dots. If we move forward with those and we award them, if there's slippage on our ability to deliver the 119, does that, if we award contracts on these other items, will it increase the cost of those contracts if we can't deliver by a certain date?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I'm happy that you asked that because that's another lessons learned here. One of the other problems we had with the prior procurement on track and systems is there was increasingly a delink between what we were trying to do in the procurement and where we were in the field. I think today, one, we know CP4 is coming to the end. And so the first work that will be done on the track is in the CP4 area. Then we will lay out and so the first one is to get just the 22 miles done. And then we will, as we're advancing the work on the other ones, we'll work with the contractor on how we would advance each of the subsequent 119 miles in line with that work. And we know there's a big difference. Right now, CP4 is going to conclude in 2023. The other 2 won't conclude until 2026. However, there will be increasingly areas to work on track on each of those other ones. And the way we're proposing this and the phasing we're doing on these contracts will allow us to work with what's going on in the field and the design build, or not the design build, but the CMGC provider here on making sure that we're doing this in a way that is informed by the real world experience in the field, so that we're not taking on undue risk for delay that would leave us with costs owed to a contractor. We're doing it based on how we're advancing that work in the field and then allowing the contract for the track to lay chronologically with that work. And so that's how we've structured this, and that's how we're pursuing this.
All right, thank you.
Sure. The last slide is just to update board members on the September workshop in San Diego. Again, we're looking at the Wednesday and Thursday of that week in San Diego, where we know we're going to be at a double tree. It's one of two double trees. It's either what's called Hotel Circle down there or Mission Valley down there, and we're just finalizing that work now. But the idea is to have it be very convenient for all of you, rooms and a location all in one place. And we're trying to get one that also is nearby other restaurants and other things for the board. We are, as a management matter, we are working to meet with Brightline's management team next month and start talking about the various things that we will be teeing up for the discussion in the workshop on Thursday, the 21st. So that's where this stands now. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for, yes, Director Scusi?
Can I ask a question that was not addressed in your presentation?
Sure.
All right. It's with regard to the, hopefully the expectation that we'll get some money from the federal government sometime in October. I just wanted to find out what's the status of that.
Yeah, so good news on a smaller grant. We were recently awarded a $20 million raise grant from the federal government to pursue the redesign of the the Fresno depot that's in place now. The next two grants are the most important that I think we're all keeping a close eye on. Is in September, the federal government will award what's called a CRISI grant. We have about a $233 million application for that CRISI grant. That will enable us to advance design and construction on some grade separations in Shafter, which is part of that extension toward Bakersfield. And then the big one that everybody's focused on is the federal state program. And the federal state program, they are proposing to award that grant where we've got a $3 billion this year ask and a sort of a 5-year agreement for about $8 billion over the next 5 years. And that we will know more about on a November-December timetable. And so those things will be expecting the awards on that in that timetable. So by the end of 2023, we'll be quite clear on where we are. And I will say one thing in that procurement schedule that we align to that federal schedule is in trains. All we want to ask the board to do in Q3 of 2023 on train sets is to allow us to qualify manufacturers, who can meet our bids, but we won't come back to the RFP until 2024 because we want to know, did the federal government, are they for helping us buy train sets, which is one of the asks of money. So that's how that coordinates. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just
Yes,
I
Director
know we
Goodman.
talked about the September meeting, but we're scheduled to have an August meeting.
We are scheduled to have an August meeting, and I think it's on August 24th, I think. Yes.
Yes.
Well, we usually cancel either July or August. Is there some reason that we have to have the August meeting?
Well, just as we got in the last presentation, we're keen to stick on schedule for the ultimate delivery of the operating segment. So we have some procurements that we are planning to bring each of the next several months.
So they're action items?
That would be an action item.
I see.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Final item, ladies and gentlemen, on today's agenda is just a quick overview of the Finance and Audit Committee meeting earlier. You've heard some of this information from Mr. Annis with regards to our 23-24 budget. The information that we reviewed today was for May of 2023. With regards to our cash position, you heard this from Mr. Annis, about $3.2 billion. About 3/4 of that is cap and trade, and the other balance, is cap and trade, and balance is Proposition 1A. There was a auction in May of cap and trade. We expect about $240 million. That's not included in the balance that I mentioned a moment ago. And the number isn't firm yet, but we would expect around 240. If you look at that on an annualized basis, following on one of the comments, I think Director Schenck had asked, so that's about 760 million if that was annualized. Not to suggest it will be, but that's somewhat consistent with what has been used in the budget for 23-24. The admin budget, we spent 77.2 million. That's about 1.8 million over the year, a year over year. That was primarily due to the filling of 63 vacant positions. Capital outlay budget in the month of May, 146 million was spent. Of that, about 97 million was design build expenditures. Looking forward into June, which is just very preliminary, there is about 254 million. Again, that's up from 146 in May. The majority of that is the funding of accruals on the bookends, which were the Caltrain electrification in the north and the Rosecrans Marquardt grade separation in the south. We're expecting June expenditures of design build for about the same as they were in May, about $97 million. The contingency summary, 2.1 billion was remaining at the end of month or in the end of May. That is spread primarily over the three construction packages. On the Central Valley construction update, the Central Valley labor or the construction progress or package up labor, excuse me, for the month of May, averaged 1,280 workers per day. That was an increase of 34 per day over the previous month. And I might add, on July 21st of this year, there were 1,400 workers out on high-speed rail projects in the Central Valley. The right-of-way, there are 2,225. If you think about that, 2,225 parcels which have been delivered out of a required number of 20, based upon the 119 miles of 2,293. That's 97% of all of the parcels necessary to build the 119 miles have been delivered. And there are no parcels that, as you heard earlier, that have not been delivered that are holding up construction. There were 11 utility relocations during the month of May. That brought the number of completed relocations at that point at 1,045. In progress, another 376. Approved to start 12, and not started were 403. There's a total of 1,836 utility relocations necessary to complete the 119 miles. On the construction progress report, also in terms of structures and guideways, they're the same as we had reported last month, which is 70 out of 93 miles of structures. Or excuse me, not miles, but 70 of 93 structures, and guideway 90 miles out of 119 are either underway or in construction. So that's a quick update of that. Any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, ladies and gentlemen, that completes the business for the Authority Board today. We will see you on August the 24th and wish you not a hot summer, but that's what we've got. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. The meeting is adjourned.